there's some questions here about this antenna setup. Ooh, this is controversial. Thank you, Mads Halverson, for this video. I just want to find the actual antenna. Okay. The Maple Wireless Mjolnir antenna. Now, Maple Wireless have tried to do something clever here, and to me, it doesn't make sense, and I can't tell, and I legitimately can't tell, whether I'm just not smart enough to understand what's happening here, or whether this is marketing BS, and I see through it. Okay? Obviously, I think of course, it's the latter, but I don't know. Let's explain what's going on here. The Maple Wireless antenna system combines two circular omni antennas, and four adapters. That combines a left and a right hand. Yes, the polarization is left/right. Now, first of all, there's no such thing as an antenna that is both left and right hand polarized. An antenna that was designed to be equally left and right polarized would actually just be linear. Okay? That's how you make a linear antenna. Okay, that's one way to think about it. So what we've got here, I believe, is two left hand and two right hand polarized antennas. Okay? Now, the theory here is, and now this is a fact, this is true, this is not a theory. When a left-hand polarized signal reflects off an object, it reverses its polarization and becomes right-hand polarized. And that actually is a selling point. It allows the receiver to reject multipath because the direct path coming into the antenna will have the correct polarization. The reflected multipath interference will have the opposite polarization, and therefore it will be sort of weaker, filtered out by the antenna. So the theory is that if you put a left and a right-hand polarized antenna on your goggles, then when you get a bounced signal with reversed polarization, you'll still be able to pick it up. Which is true. But I'm not convinced that that gives you better coverage. So, first of all, one of the things you're doing, when you have four antennas, you've got some kind of diversity situation. You might have spatial diversity, where those antennas point different directions, or where one antenna is an omni and one's a directional. So you're adding spatial diversity, meaning you can cover different physical areas. When you switch from spatial diversity and you put mismatched antennas, like one's left hand and one's right hand, you're trading spatial diversity for a different kind of diversity. You're trading it for polarization diversity. Okay. I mean, you could make an argument that that's worth doing, but you want to realize that there's a trade-off here. Now, with the DJI system, this is not just a diversity setup. They've got four antennas here. Some are transmitting, some are receiving, some are doing both. I don't actually know fully what's going on here. But DJI designed this system to have four antennas all covering basically the same area. So DJI, theoretically, we can infer that they didn't design this to have spatial diversity, that they designed it to have some other thing going on. So in theory, there could be an advantage here. But here's why I'm not sold on polarization diversity, because we've seen this before. I'll clear that overlay. It didn't need to be there. We've seen this before in analog, where people try to sell a left and a right hand polarized. The problem with that is that it assumes that the bounced path is going to be as strong or stronger than the direct path. And I'm not convinced that that will usually be true, but it's not impossible. If you think about it, if you're in a situation where you've got a direct path between you and the quad, an unobstructed line of sight, and there's a bounce, okay? You absolutely would rather have the direct path because every time there's a bounce, you're going to lose some signal strength. So that's just a fact. You would not want to have a left-hand polarized and a right-hand polarized bringing both of those signals in. Although, if you had a good diversity system, it would detect that the left-hand polarized one was weaker, the right-hand polarized one was stronger, and it would select for the direct path. But in that case, what advantage are you getting by having a cross-polarized antenna? You're still rejecting the multipath through the diversity algorithm. You're not benefiting. Okay. The theoretical case where having mixed polarization would make sense would be if you had an obstructed direct path, like there's a big wall or something, and your direct signal is going through the wall and losing a lot of strength, and there's a bounced path that goes around the wall, and so by cross-polarizing your antennas, you'll pick up that bounced path and it'll be stronger. I just think that that's a pretty specific situation. And I'm not convinced that what you're giving up, because if you think about it, when you have cross-polarized antennas like this, the whole time that you have a direct path, your right-hand antenna is basically not being used. You've essentially thrown away half of your antennas because you've got a right-hand polarized antenna on the quad and you got two right-hand antennas and two left-hand antennas on your goggles, which means that the whole time you actually have clear line of sight, you're just throwing away two of your antennas. I'm not convinced that trade-off is worth it. So we really need to see a test. I thought Wesley Vardy did this test. I know Wesley Vardy tested the Mjolnir antenna in clear line of sight environment, and it did worse than the iFlight Crystal. And he said he was going to test it like in a parking garage, but I'm not sure if he ever did because I don't remember seeing it. So theoretically, this works better in a line of sight environment, in a high multipath environment with obstructed line of sight. But I think it's a pretty specific situation. The other thing is, yeah, we'd have to test it. Maybe I'll test it. I thought Wesley Vardy was going to test it, and I was just going to let him do it. But I don't think he's done it. He must have got busy, so maybe I'll have to do it. Anyway. Let's see here. Sandra Dubronner. Sandra Dubronner is a smart person about RF. He's in the Discord. I'm curious if he thinks I'm missing anything there, or if I've gotten something wrong. Nate Strandberg, if your Discord invite expired, DM me on Patreon. I'll send you another one. Yeah, and Shady says, don't they sell it as a long-range antenna, which makes even less sense? Yeah. Yep. Because for long-range, you absolutely are never... If you're truly doing long-range, you're always going to have an unobstructed direct path, and therefore you would always want to reject any multipath bounces. And the question I go back to is, what are you giving up? Why did DJI design this goggle with 4 matching antennas? And what we're doing by putting cross-polarized antennas here is saying, some of the time, we're going to get much worse signal to 2 of those antennas because they're not polarized correctly. And maybe some of the time, we'll get better signal, but when are those times? Sandra Dubronner says it would take an hour or more to discuss it. Well, he didn't say I was wrong. The other thing is, and Jaloman brings this up, Jaloman says, I think polarization is overrated in general. I run left-hand polarized while buddies are running right-hand polarized. We don't notice a big difference when we're watching each other. Yeah, so, you know, you're going to lose, but if you're truly cross-polarized, you're going to lose theoretically 10 or 15 dB of signal strength, which is significant. For perspective, a 6 dB change in signal strength is a doubling or halving of range, roughly. So if you're losing 12 dB, that's 1/4 the range. So in theory, a left-hand polarized antenna watching a right-hand polarized transmitter would get 1/4 the range compared to a right-hand polarized one. But in real life, we do this and we don't notice that big of a difference. And I think one of the reasons is that these antennas that we're buying aren't actually as strongly polarized as they're supposed to be. I don't have the data to back that up. Sandra DeBronner says it's up to 30 dB. Yeah. That's even higher. 30 dB is huge. I suspect that, and the other thing is that because there are bounces in the environment, the signal is reflecting all over the place. You could transmit a 100% right-hand polarized signal. It goes out into the environment and it bounces all over the place. And what actually comes into your antenna is not 100% right-hand polarized. So I think in reality, the mismatch is not as big a deal as it would be in the lab. And frankly, if people do get better performance with these antennas, I wonder if they're just really nice antennas. But to really know, we'd need to put them on a test rig and like test their polarization, test their, all their parameters.